Good day, everyone. ESOL International's English as a Foreign Language intersection is pleased to present this webinar titled Students' Engagement in Remote Instruction, Issues and Strategies. Our guest speaker is Ismael Facel, and we are very pleased to welcome all of you to this webinar. My name is Araceli Salas, the current EFL IS Chair, and I will be your moderator for today's event. This presentation will last 60 minutes and includes a question and answer period. To enter a question, simply type your question into the box on the lower left side of your screen and then click on the send button. And now it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Ismael Facel. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Let me read a little about him. Ismael Facel is a lecturer at the Faculty of Education of Simon Fraser University. His main research interests include English for academic and professional purposes, socialization into academic discourse literacy, and language assessment. He has been engaged in teaching and researching academic literacy for over a decade now, and his publications have appeared in the Journal of English for Academic Purposes, English for Specific Purposes, the English for Specific Purposes Journal, and the TESL Canada Journal, among others. And he is speaking from Canada, so we really appreciate your being here, Ismael. Yes, you may begin. We are all ears.
Thank you so much for the generous introduction, Araceli, and also my special thanks go to Nancy Flores. So both of you, Nancy and Araceli, for putting this together and organizing this online event. And also thank you, everybody, for your interest and attendance. I hope you'll find this webinar interesting. So I'm going to, well, again, I was already introduced. I work at Simon Fraser University. I am also affiliated with TESOL International. I am the immediate past chair of English for Specific Purposes interest section. I'm also affiliated with Cambridge ESOL assessment. All right, and in terms of my research and publications, so my work in terms of my scholarship and research has appeared in various journals and including in TESOL Encyclopedia. I've mostly published on academic literacy and also on language assessment. And more recently, here in Canada at Simon Fraser University, I proposed and now we've launched a research project, which is titled Exploring Student and Instructor Experiences with Remote Instruction in an Academic Literacy course in the pandemic era. And then I'm going to share with you some of the findings from this ongoing project, because this is an ongoing project. Right after the pandemic, hit, we, like many other institutions, we had to also transition to remote instruction and to virtual instruction, and then so I decided to start this investigation, which is ongoing. We started that in the summer, well, part of the spring, and then in the summer, we're collecting data this term, and we'll go on to collect data probably up until spring, subject to funding. So I hope I know how to change the slides here. So, and sorry if I have to, keep drinking or sipping something, because I'm recovering from a strep sore throat. So Yeah. So what I want to draw our attention to today in this webinar mainly is engagement and student engagement. So I want us all to take a moment and think about these questions revolving around student engagement in this online or virtual remote instruction. And in this new milieu that after the pandemic, we've all had to essentially switch to. So let's take a moment to think about what we mean by engagement and also the challenges and the strategies. We will come back to this. We'll circle back to this slide and these questions, but essentially, what is engagement? How do we measure engagement? Why do we need to have engagement essentially? And how can we not only promote, but also sustain and maintain engagement, right? So there's no definite answer. It's just sharing experiences and pointers and best practices that we're going to focus on. So the way I approach engagement, based on the scholarship and research in which engagement is grounded, like any other educator and a language teacher, right? So I think of engagement in terms of these questions, these WH questions, right? So what is engagement and why do we need engagement? And in what context and when? Well, in this particular time, and what is so special about this particular time, and where, of course, in this new online milieu, in this online environment, as people refer to it, and also how. Well, probably how is why most of you are here, to hopefully have some takeaways from this webinar. But let's think about this in terms of these four WH prompts or questions. So first of all, what do you think engagement is? Let's think about engagement. We are all educators and language teachers, essentially. Doesn't matter what level you're teaching. I guess we are all interested in teaching language, be it language and literacy, or I don't know, EFL, ESL, and these definitions, of course, are basically can be boiled down to language teaching, right? Language and literacy teaching. So in terms of definitions, there are many definitions, but this is one of the ways in which student engagement is defined. I'm going to let you read it. Or probably I'd better read it out loud and we can think about this. So student engagement, and this is from Education Glossary, refers to the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion that students show when they are learning or being taught, which basically extends to and covers and includes motivation for learning and progress in their education. So this is an agreed upon. So this is an agreed upon definition of student engagement. We need to know what it is before promoting it and before taking steps and measures to increase it and sustain it. And as I noted earlier, what we need is not just the spark, right, of engagement, but rather sustained student engagement, such that it's maintained, right? Such that we recruit and retain student engagement. So what is student sustained engagement? Well, it's clear, as the name suggests, right? So it's basically, even and sustained. It's maintained throughout, like the course that we're teaching. And what it does is that it functions as a facilitator of student learning. So that's why it's important. It can lead to meaningful outcomes, and it can prevent boredom and lack of respect for authority. Okay, so if this is the definition, we're not gonna just limit ourselves to the definition and concept. Now, the question is, so why? And well, this is what Benjamin Franklin currently said, right? So tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me or engage me and I learn, right? So we also refer to engagement as involvement, right? So being involved, right? Full throttle. So now to explain it and to explain its importance, that is the importance of engagement, student sustained engagement. In my work and in my scholarship and research, I draw from a conceptual learning lens, right? And that learning lens is referred to as socialization, right? So socialization or academic discourse socialization or language socialization. It is a conceptual lens, right? And it allows us to think about and conceptualize what engagement is and basically why it matters. So based on this view of socialization, it's a theory which has been researched enough, so it's grounded in research. So learning essentially occurs both in formal and informal contexts, both in online classroom and outside, the classroom. So we need to target both, right? Both the online classroom and the part of the classroom activities, which is not online, right? So, and again, I don't want to get to the nitty gritty of the concepts. I'm going to just very quickly go through this, but learning based on this conceptual model occurs based on interaction. Interaction with whom? Interaction with people, right? Now, not just the instructor, not just the teacher, but also peers, right? Friends, right? Outside the classroom, and also interaction with resources, including websites, model texts, which is really key. We will get to that. And our feedback, so interaction, students interact with peer feedback, instructor feedback, and also, as I'll explain towards the end of the webinar, self-assessment and these things. So that's the conceptual model. So the conceptual model essentially tells us that learning occurs mainly as a result of interaction. And interaction is not just with people, but also with resources and even interaction with our feedback. It's not just oral, but also with written text. Okay, so, and this has been researched sufficiently. So now, where and when? So by that I mean the context, our particular circumstances and context. So we need to think about the differences between, teaching face-to-face, which we used to have, probably we will have after the pandemic is over, and teaching online, virtual instruction. So pedagogically, whether you have, synchronous, right? So real-time streaming, or asynchronous. Definitely part of that is asynchronous. Part of your teaching is asynchronous. Your main means of interaction is through discussion forums, I don't know, alternative means of assessment, right? So it's not face-to-face anymore. And collaborative, work and, I don't know, breakout rooms, for example, if you use Zoom. In terms of operation, so the class is in session essentially 24/7. So sometimes I get emails, in the middle of the night, especially, in this particular time when students are in different time zones. So the class is essentially going on 24/7. And students in this new milieu can be everywhere. They can be in their home countries, they can be in Canada, in North America, different time zones. Now, in terms of our role, we're not the sage on the stage, as people say anymore, right? Rather, we can facilitate student learning, right? So, and I want to get to, again, the key role of the pivotal role of engagement in this new milieu. And we can help and facilitate students' knowledge construction and learning by guiding their discussions and also by keeping them engaged. Now, of course, we haven't gotten to how we can increase students' engagement. Pardon me. So this is, again, based on a survey that was done in British Columbia, the province where I am located in. So this was asked of instructors, right? So in terms of student engagement, right? So, and then as you can see, instructors reflecting on their experiences and comparing face-to-face and online instruction. Well, they seem to think that engagement is an issue, basically, right? So students are not as engaged as instructors want them to be. Okay, so, but still we have to address the question of how we can, recruit and retain students' engagement. Okay, we'll get to that. And again, based on another survey that was done here by the University of British Columbia, so students' most significant challenges to engagement, we'll get to strategy, general, were lack of focus because of different, we have these days an array of stressors and anxiety inducers, low motivation, they can't manage time sometimes, right? And lack of responsiveness from overwhelmed instructors or teachers or teaching assistants, and lack of flexibility, right? Sometimes tech issues, internet issues, and navigating different ways and different, teaching styles by students. All right, so, and as I said, this specific project, which I'm doing collaboratively with, excuse me, Dr. Steve Marshall and Dr. Joel Henk-Hartzy at Simon Fraser University. In terms of student engagement, I'm going to share some of the findings and student voices with you, although the findings are still, in the process and they still have to emerge, really. So this is a quote from one of the participants. I'm going to let you read it. So rather than discussions, in-class discussions. Now we have discussion boards. So learning management systems, Moodles. So this is worrisome, right? And then frustrating, right, for us teachers. And we're, of course, based on the students' feedback and the data, we're trying to tweak and modify the course offering and telling, the instructors, how to modify their teaching approach such that engagement is enhanced, but still it's an issue. So this is really telling, I think. I never saw any students comment on any others writing or anything like that. I do not think students felt obligated, to participate in discussions, right? That is just like texting and typing, right? So doesn't feel real. Now, we'll get to the how part, but it's good to have a sense of what students are saying, actually. And this is from Jane, another participant. This is, of course, a pseudonym. I prefer not to use the discussion board because I don't like it that everyone can see my questions. So again, that's something that we need to take into account, right? So students feel like that, it's a kind of risk taking, right? When you post a question or a response, if it's not grammatically correct, then I don't know, they may feel that, they may feel more self-conscious, basically. This is another comment, from Jane. So the instructor, and actually, I was the instructor. So this is from my class in the summer. I use breakout rooms, Zoom breakout rooms. And this is Jane's comment. I'm going to let you read it. I shouldn't have revealed that, probably. I remember the instructor, who happens to be Ismail, put us in groups, and no one ever talked in my group. Although, you can, just pop in and check. You can't check on every breakout room, at the same time, right? So you can go from group to group and say, okay, what's going on in this group? And it's okay, well, we're still trying to figure things out. But this is, again, an issue, right? No one ever talked in my group. No one ever said anything in the group. Everyone's cameras were off. And of course, for privacy reasons, here in Canada, and I think in North America and most places, people are given choice to have their cameras off if they want, but this is an issue. The other people on the other side of your computer don't really feel real. So nobody ever talked. So seems the instructor, was not probably successful, in fostering engagement and interaction in breakout rooms. Anyway, so this is another comment. I prefer more face-to-face classes, that is, because there's really like small class size, and also you can really discuss with others. So in terms of class sizes, sometimes now we have more students. It depends, of course, on where you're teaching and your institution, but that's also an issue, right? In terms of engagement. And so I'm not going to bombard you with and overwhelm you with all these quotes. We're going to just get an idea, and then we're going to move on, in terms of what students think. So this is also telling from Jane. I kind of felt isolated, right? So when students feel isolated, obviously they don't engage, right? And this is from Mary, another student. I felt like I was doing the course alone. We don't want our courses to be like that. No one would want their courses to be, taught in that way. But if that's how students perceive the classes to be like, then we need to revisit, we need to rethink and revise perhaps the way we used to teach and the way we've always been teaching. So that's my point. We're going to get to again get back to the lens and then to the how question, which is the meat of this webinar, I guess. So going back to socialization, if socialization, from the perspective of socialization, if learning occurs both in formal and informal contexts, both in the classroom and outside the classroom, and if learning is mostly contingent on, predicated on interaction and engagement, meaningful interaction, meaningful engagement with people, but also resources, including our feedback, then what is it that needs to be revised and essentially done? So let's get to the how part. But before we get to the how part, I want us to think about this question. And I don't know if if you can all go to this Jamboard. I'm going to share this link if I can with you so that you can click on it. So sorry. I'm going to put this in the chat box, this link. Let's try this. If it doesn't work, then I'm going to ask you to use the chat box, but let's see if this works. So please bear with me. So try this and see if this works. And it'd be great if you can use the, the sticky notes to post your ideas. So how can we enhance engagement? Actually, it should be engagement, right? Yeah.
We don't have access.
Oh, okay. So can you use the? So sorry for that. Says you need to request access. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So could you use the chat box function? I hesitate to use the breakout rooms because it might not work. I can try that, but let's think about the ways in which we can increase. It should be actually engagement, but it's just a typo. If you can use the chat box function and share your thoughts. So now that the Jamboard didn't work for some reason, I think I should have thought of that. But anyway, that's one of that comes with the territory of using, online affordances, right? So we are always on a learning curve. So in some of the workshops works, but sometimes it doesn't. So my apologies. So if you can think about how we can foster and recruit and retain students' engagement and interactivity in the online teaching environment, it'd be great. And so everybody can see that, so building a community, Yeah, it's really important. So preparing products and working on projects together, yeah, and in breakout rooms, like a task, exactly. So task-based learning, tailored towards the needs of students in the uh, virtual instruction mode. So yeah, feedback practices, exactly. And it's very important for them to feel, like being part of a team, right? Again, community, building sense of community, which was reflected, in the students' remarks. So let's have a couple more minutes before we get to some of the recommendations. Exactly, rubric-based teaching and making the rubric explicit. So making the evaluation criteria explicit. All right. Let's have another minute, and then I'll share with you some of the tips and pointers and strategies that we have been trying out in Canada, in particular in Southern Fraser University. Okay, so yeah, there seems to be a consensus around some of these very important pointers, namely, feedback practices, so making rubric and evaluation criteria explicit, fostering a sense of community, yeah, and also developing tasks and asking students or getting students to work collaboratively on tasks, yeah, collaborative projects, exactly, pair presentations, jigsaw activities, yeah, exactly, and positive messages. So they need that validation and affirmation, so that hopefully they don't feel like I think it was Jane or Mary who said that I felt like I was doing the course alone. We don't want that to be the case. All right, so let's get to the how part. So these are some of these are more general and some of these are more specific, right? So in general, as was pointed out by some of you, so embedding and utilizing more collaborative learning opportunities and practices. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, there are various strategies that we can keep my throat kind of wet. And so using Jamboards, which, I could not actually, use in this webinar, but I'll have to figure out. So this is an example, of essentially getting students to work collaboratively and interactively. Another strategy that can be drawn from, and I have used it successfully in my teaching, and I've recommended that to fellow instructors, is using scenario-based learning. But of course, it depends on the level of students who you're teaching, right? So scenario-based learning, right? So giving students scenarios to work on. This is an example. So where I had students work on a scenario and to analyze this scenario, again, in groups or in pairs. Another thing that was pointed out in your remarks is the interconnection between teaching, learning, and assessment, right? So we all know that, right? Now, based on that, the more we can deploy and embed learning-oriented assessment, which is an important concept. So what do we mean by learning-oriented assessment? As the name indicates, is assessment which is geared at enhancing learning, right? Not just assessment for assessment's sake, but assessment and evaluation, which is meant to promote students' learning, and it can also enhance our teaching. So one way of doing that is, again, using rubrics, right? So rubric-based teaching. I remember there was an interesting article that was published. I can't remember the author's name, but it was, so the title was "To Give is Better Than to Receive." And what it referred to was training students with rubric, right? With and raising their awareness of the explicit and specific evaluation criteria, and then asking them to provide feedback and to self-assess, right, before submitting their work, final work, to the teacher, and also to provide feedback to their peers. And the argument was that, and based on research, was that when students provide feedback, right, and peer assess, they actually turn out to benefit more from that feedback, and their attention is heightened, right, regarding the evaluation criteria. So one way to essentially deploy learning-oriented assessment is to train students with rubric, and deploying self-assessment, right, and peer assessment. It doesn't have to be assessment that is like necessarily providing a score, a mark, a grade, but rather providing feedback, right? So as an assessment guy, I essentially have been, following the recent trends and shifts in terms of what assessment is. So I don't want to get to the nitty-gritty of this, but there has been this shift in the past couple of decades from the traditional model of assessment to the modern, view of assessment. And rather than assessment of learning, which in the traditional view of assessment comprised and constituted the main part of assessment, now we have assessment as learning, right, and assessment for learning. So using assessment as a catalyst of students' learning, and assessment of learning is still part of that, but it just constitutes a smaller part of that, right? So it's not assessment as just testing, right, students for what they know, but rather using assessment to enhance students' engagement and learning, right? So another way to provide, another way to enhance engagement is our feedback practices, right? So if we can manage to provide actionable feedback, timely feedback, which is a challenge. We all know that, especially now, providing online feedback, then it can definitely, serve to enhance students' engagement. Now, another thing about providing feedback, which may or may not apply to you, depending on the level that you're teaching, is the concept of HOCS and LOCS, right? So providing HOCS tiered feedback before LOCS feedback. So higher order versus lower order concerns, right? Which you might be familiar with. It particularly applies to writing courses, right? So, and you can read up more on that. It's a well-known concept, in OWL, online writing library out of Purdue University. So especially when it comes to providing feedback on students' writing, they say the best practice is to provide HOCS level feedback before providing LOCS tiered feedback to students. So, and HOCS refers to higher order concerns. So in terms of ideas, organization of ideas first, and connections of ideas, development of topic, and then lower order feedback, which is concerns having to do with structure, mechanics, proofreading concerns. So a focus, a mere focus or an overemphasis on, which is the case in many classes, probably. An overfocus essentially on the mechanics and structure and students' errors in these two areas can somehow demotivate students, right? But they focus up on, so sometimes I tell my students that I'm not going to provide you with copy editing or proofreading kind of feedback, but rather I'm going to focus mostly on ideas in this round of feedback. And then, if you plan the assessment or assignment in installments, so the students write in drafts, then before the final draft, of course, you can also provide some feedback in terms of LOCS, right? So lower order concerns. Anyway, it is something that also is contingent upon the level that you're teaching. So a focus basically on macro features first and then micro features. Sorry, this strep throat, is still with me. And this is another general pointer that instruction of online classes needs to be humanized. Why? Because it's digitized or digitalized rather, right? We need to take steps, deliberate steps to make this delivery more humanized and personalized, right? And proactive and present based on the research. So what are some of the best practices? Well, using a flipped learning model. And I think this was pointed out in one of the comments that I checked out, if I remember correctly. So a flipped learning model essentially is based on, well, they say a picture or an image is worth 1,000 words. So in a flipped classroom or flipped learning model, before and outside and in advance of a class, what happens is that students are given a particular task, individually or collaboratively to work on. And then during the class, they use the class time to practice, right? To engage with projects or tasks. And then after the class, so the class has been flipped basically, right? There is some kind of follow-up, right? So we can design the class such that the students before coming to class, they have specific things to attend to individually or collaboratively. And in the class time, they can work together. And then after class, again, based on what went before the class and during the class, there's something to be done or something to be handed over basically to the instructor. There are other tips. So creating opportunities to work in small groups with a particular task again. So in the breakout rooms that I apparently had created, students did not engage, probably because there was no specific task. Again, feedback is very important, frequent feedback. Beginning classes with, some kind of warm up, or if we can have a personal touch and reach out to students more, and such that we can foster that sense of community, excuse me. It's, again, something that can facilitate students' learning and engagement. Using multiple modalities and also pacing. This is something that has really helped our classes here at Simon Fraser University. So using different modalities. So even when it comes to providing feedback, you can record your voice. You can record a video, but I don't know. You can use more images rather than a mere or heavier reliance on text, because the students, if something is too texty, basically, they tend to just, skip through it and browse through it. And also pacing, right? So as they say, sometimes less is more. So we need to pace our delivery, and then sometimes we need to just, teach less rather than more. Offering opportunities to meet one-on-one. And we have 3 minutes, I know. So, and the more compassionate and understanding we can be, the more chances are for students to be, engaged and involved. So, getting to know students, again, on a personal level, which is not an easy job, I understand, given the size of classes, and not making assumptions about students, right? So teaching who is really in front of you, and also considering that all host of issues that they are also grappling with. Again, using think, pair, share to the extent possible, and we have tried out these tips and pointers, and they seem to work. And again, presenting content in a variety of ways. So using multiple modalities, texts, do not always work, right? So other modalities, so like images, voice, sound, video. But of course, we have to be judicious, and then using them. Thinking more about our instructions. I have actually, reflecting on my instructions to students, I realized that sometimes, there's more than one interpretation of my instructions, right? So I would just, we use Canvas or, so learning management systems, or you might be using Moodle, for example. I would write a set of instructions, and then different students had different interpretations. Then I step back and realize that, okay, maybe in a classroom, just oral instructions were easier, but now I have to be very careful and probably read my instructions a couple of times or a few times before, clicking the send button to, send the instructions to students, and sharing resources like what we are doing now. Some of these might work, in my context, they may not work in your context, and essentially enjoying the opportunity. This is an opportunity for us to all learn, how we can essentially enhance students' learning and engagement, and let's enjoy it. I mean, it's something that over which we had no control, right? I mean, the pandemic and the transition to online instruction. And this is in terms of designing, this is what I'm going to leave you with, right? So this is something that we all are familiar with. So essentially, planning assessment assignments such that it's conducive to students' learning, having clear outcomes. We all know that. So I'm going to stop now so that we end on schedule. Thank you very much for your interest and attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ismael. And okay, we're going to see if some of our attendees have questions, but I want to tell you that attendees are interested in getting your slides. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I can send them to you. Yeah.
You can send them to me or directly to Nancy. She can send them to you.
Sure, I will write it on my to-do list. Yeah.
I think you have made think about our instruction these days. Yes.
Yeah, although in terms of the data, because the data are emerging and because, you know, it's a collaborative research project which is ongoing, so I may cut out the part about, you know, the students' comments. So, but I will send them to you.
Because I was just thinking about emergency remote instruction, and I was like, this is online, but you made me see that right now these Zoom sessions can substitute face-to-face, so we have blended learning in the end.
Exactly.
Thank you. Anybody would like to ask a question? We have some minutes to answer your questions. You can ask him directly, or you can write your questions in or comments in the chat. Ismael will be glad to answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you all for your interest.
I feel like I am in class.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question here as why we can get success using this method. Why do you think that this can make us successful teachers or instructors?
Well, because I think at the end of the day, it can enrich our bag of tips and tricks and, you know, our toolbox. So, you know, once hopefully the pandemic is over and we go back to normal, you know, teaching face to face, we have expanded our capacities and we have a larger toolbox and bag of tricks. So then we can, if something doesn't work, for example, we know that, okay, I've tried, say, multiple modalities. You know, I've used images that now I can draw from, I can recycle. So I think it's like, you know, having to essentially attend a training course, you know, a practical or practicum, basically, where you have to, you know, try out new methods. And it's not easy, but I think at the end of the day, it enriches our set of tips and strategies. So that's the way I think about it and why I think it can make us more successful teachers and educators at the end of the day.
Thank you. And we have another question. In your opinion, what age group are these strategies best applied?
That's a very good question. I think they can be mostly applicable to adult, you know, student classes. So with young learners, I think given their different attention spans, there needs to be another layer of, well, there is another added layer of complexity, and hence I think the tips and strategies would be different. I think these are mostly applicable to classes attended by adults, and probably intermediate, or at least lower intermediate, rather than beginning classes in terms of proficiency.
Okay, we have a comment from Deborah Short, former president. So president, and she says, thank you for sharing your practices.
Well, thank you, Deborah, for attending this. Deborah is, you know, a long hand when it comes to research and practice, and it's an honor to have her here. And so thank you. We're still trying to learn, you know, from our practices, and you know, hopefully we'll have more to share with you all once we have all of the data, you know.
Thank you. I think that everybody says that thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. It was a pleasure.
Nancy, when will we get the recording and probably the slides?
Awesome.
It will be available within 1 week.
Within a week. Okay. So let me just check. There are no more questions. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, and thank you for this great session, Ismael.
Thank you, and take great care of yourself and everybody, and stay safe. It seems I was not careful enough. I didn't get COVID, but I got strep throat.
Oh my God.
So I'm still on antibiotics.
Okay, so with this, we must conclude today's online program. Today's presentation was titled Students' Engagement in Remote Instruction, Issues and Strategies. A special thank you to our presenter, Ismael Fasel. And with this, we conclude the session today. We thank you for your attendance, and please keep checking our program with the English as Foreign Language intersection. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ismael. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for everybody here.